My name is Elizabeth Halter. I'm 41 years old, and this story began with a single text that came 5 days after my husband's funeral in the early hours of the morning. Don't tell them I know everything. Sender, David Halter. Thubby. Man I buried, the man I identified at the morgue, the man whose autopsy report I signed, the man whose ashes still sat in a box in our living room. The phone was in my hand. 3:17 a.m. I was in bed alone, but I'd never felt more watched. When the message disappeared from the screen, I couldn't move my finger, couldn't make a sound. I just barely breathed. David had been everything to me for 6 years. We'd lived in 4 cities, 2 homes, countless storms together. Yes, there had been silences lately. But don't all marriages have those? At least, that's what I thought. The police came Monday morning. They said his car missed a turn, crashed into a telephone pole, and burst into flames. No witnesses, no camera footage, the body, unrecognizable. But I identified him by his ring inside. David's wedding band, he had engraved our line, "Meet me in infinity, E.H." We held a closed casket funeral. I asked for the ashes. "I want him home," I said. While I was still burning inside, I tried to say goodbye to him in the corner of our bedroom. But that text? That text said everything might be a lie after that. Message, I checked the phone log, recent calls. Empty. WhatsApp? No last seen. The number was active, but I couldn't call back. I called the carrier. The line was still active, but the device was now pinging from another region. 4 days after David's death, his SIM card was reactivated. And then, a voice in me screamed, what if the person I cremated wasn't him? What if David faked his death? And I was just a piece in whatever game he built, my first thought, a prank. But then, I remembered things. Late meetings, deleted email. Change the drawer he never opened, and that one time. I found a second phone under his pillow. I didn't think much of it back then. Now, everything started making sense. No more texts came, but that one text was enough to make me question our entire 6 years of marriage. That morning, I took out David's ashes, I opened the box, and for the first time, I wondered if it was really him in there, and the only thing I could think was, if you're burying me, David, I won't be waiting by your grave. But maybe this time, it's my turn to dig. After David's message, sleep wasn't an option, they say. Curtains were open, but the house felt dark. A faint streetlight cast a glow on the wall, right above the urn. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the same screen over and over again. Don't tell them I know everything. Was it a threat? Warning, a plea? The message came at 3:17 a.m., but cell tower data said it was sent from outside Boston, a small town to the northwest called Glenbrook. David had never been there, or at least. That's what he told me. The next day, I started going through his old belongings. Nothing in his pockets, just bank statements in his drawers, but behind the shoe rack. I found a small metal box. It was empty, except for a note. Par, 78.9, ED. It looked like coordinates. I typed them into Google Maps. They pointed to a rural area near the North Carolina border. Glenbrook, coincidence? I didn't think so. Made a decision right then. The answers weren't in my house. They were where he ran. 3 days later, I drove to Glenbrook. My phone stayed silent. David's number was still active, but no more messages came, and yet. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My hotel room was tiny. Its window faced a dense forest. My eyes were glued to the map. My fingers couldn't stop opening the screenshot of that message. The coordinates led to an old farmhouse. On the edge of town. The listing said for rent, but there was a security camera by the front gate. It wasn't abandoned. The next morning, I went to that farm, in front of the door, a single footprint sunk in mud, in the trash, an empty container of David's favorite coffee, like the footsteps of a ghost. Just as I turned back to my car, my phone buzzed, same number, another text. I know what you're doing. This time you won't stop me. It sounded like a threat, but not directed at me. It felt misplaced, or maybe someone was using David's identity to fight a different war. And that's when it hit me. This was no longer just a marriage story. This was a fake death, a hidden life, and possibly the start of a battle I couldn't escape. And I was already deep inside that war. That night, I couldn't sleep in my hotel room in Glenbrook. My phone was in my hand. The screen had gone dark, but the voice in my head wouldn't quiet. David is alive. And he's sending messages to someone else. Who was that someone? Did David have a past he never told me about? Was this not the beginning, but the continuation of a much older story? The next morning, I went back to the farmhouse. But this time, there was movement inside. The curtains were closed, but I could hear voices. A man's voice. Low, harsh. I walked around the back to avoid the cameras. Just as I approached the rear door, someone called out behind me. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I turned. A man in his 50s stood there, coffee cup in hand, wearing a farm coverall, but his eyes looked a lot like David's. Something inside me snapped. "Family," he said. His name was Michael Halter, David's half-brother, but David had never once mentioned a brother to me. "David is dead," I said. Michael looked away. "Maybe not." His words froze me. "What do you mean?" "Someone came here 3 days ago," he said. I didn't see his face, but the way he walked, it looked like him. Michael invited me inside. There, sitting in the corner, was one of David's old backpacks. Inside, only a notebook. On the first page, a single line. "If you found this note, the plan didn't work." As I flipped through, I noticed several. Pages had been torn out, but the remaining notes read things like, "George is trying to contact me. I need to shut him up. Elizabeth can't know this. I have to protect her. Use the secure line. Only message there." My head was spinning with questions colliding. Who is George? What was David hiding from me? Was he really trying to protect me, or just deceiving? "Me?" Michael lowered his head. "David only talked about you once," he said. He told me, "I don't want her touching the darkness." Darkness? What was I being pulled into? And then it hit me. David didn't die. But the man I buried wasn't. Just a body. He was the lie I had loved for years, and now I felt like I was the only truth left inside that lie. After leaving Michael's house, I kept reading and rereading the pages from David's backpack. But one line wouldn't leave my mind. Secure line. Only message there. What did that mean? Was David's real number the one I'd known? Or was that just a stage prop for me to believe in? 2 numbers, 2 devices, 2 lives, and I'd only been a witness to one of them. That night, Michael offered to let me stay at the farm, but I couldn't find peace. When I was alone, I carefully ran my fingers along the lining of the backpack, felt a hidden zipper. Inside was a phone, an old Android model. The battery had been removed. I found a charger and powered it up. As soon as it turned on, one app loaded automatically. Cipher chat, dark mode only. When I opened it, a single message popped up. "Is that you? Date 2 nights ago, sender, GH. David had never replied. GH, George Halter? I asked Michael about the name. He froze. "George?" he asked. "He messaged you?" "His name came up in David's notes too," I said. Michael sat down slowly. After a long silence, he spoke in a whisper. "George was our full brother, but he died 12 years ago." A chill ran through me. How did he die? David couldn't protect him, or silenced him. Michael didn't respond, but his eyes said enough. That night, I opened Cipher Chat again, and I messaged the mysterious GH, "Who are you?" The response was only 3 words. "I could ask you." There was no room for fear anymore, because this was now darker than David's fake death. If George really died, who was this? And if David was still alive, why were the messages still coming? Marriage built on a lie, a staged death, and now, a chain of messages from beyond the grave. But I'm no longer just his wife. I'm no longer just someone who knows. I am the last living witness to a truth that's starting to unravel. The person on Cipher Chat, GH, messaged again the next day. Don't reply, just listen. If David is alive, he could destroy you. My hands shook as I read it, but not from fear, from rage. If David was still alive, if my entire grieving process, the funeral, the ashes, the tears, were just a curtain. I was going to rip that curtain down. When I talked to Michael, I learned that after George's death, a massive rift formed in their family. George's death was officially listed as drowning, but the file was sealed. The autopsy report was incomplete, and David had met George alone just one day before his death. Michael summed it up with one line. David was always afraid of what George knew. That night, I went down to the basement of the farmhouse. There was an old metal cabinet where David had stored his notebooks, inside several file folders. One folder had a label. When I opened it, I found 7 different names, 7 different birth dates, and 7 bank accounts, opened across 7 states. David wasn't running from someone, he was living multiple lives. Most of the fake identities had one shared location, Everett, Washington, and each file had encrypted notes, if Elizabeth finds out, the plan is over. George's records may still exist. Only Everett has a secure cipher line. I wasn't afraid anymore. Because now David's secret was in my hands. Whatever he had been hiding from me, I was going to find it. The next morning, I messaged Cipher, chat again. If George is dead, who are you? The reply took time, but it came. I'm not George, but I carry everything he left behind. Was this a hacker, or someone who had discovered encrypted data that George had hidden? Years ago? Just then, CipherChat sent a location pin, Everett, Terminal 9, and a single line underneath. David might still be there, but this time, he won't leave a trace. That's when I realized this wasn't just David's story anymore. This was a dark reckoning, where every truth I held was shattered and everything I had buried was coming back, and now it was my turn to face it. When I arrived in Everett, the sky was gray and heavy. Terminal 9 was an old dockyard, now used for storage. But at night, some sections still had power. The location from CipherChat led me to a large warehouse in the corner, a small office, and a broken security camera above the door. No name, no company logo, but inside, a weak Wi-Fi signal was being emitted, the same signal that had been sending messages to my phone. I didn't knock because I wasn't afraid anymore. When I walked in, I saw a wall full of monitors. Some were showing security footage, but one of them was streaming a live feed from my own living room, my living room. The table where David's ashes rested, my eyes froze, and in that moment, I understood. Someone had been watching me for months. I walked toward a drawer, inside, photos, moments. From our marriage, but some I'd never seen before. David at meetings I never knew about. David at a cafe with a woman, a photo taken just before they hugged. David, alive, just 3 days before he was buried. Just then, CipherChat sent another message. Can you handle the truth now? Underneath, a link. I clicked it. A video started to play. David was speaking into a webcam. His eyes looked exhausted. His voice trembled, but his words were clear. Elizabeth, if you're watching this, either the plan failed or you found everything. I was never completely honest with you, but I hid things to protect you. George isn't dead, and I was the target of the people hunting him. In that moment, Michael's face, George's sealed files, the fake identities, everything clicked. David had faked his death to hide the files George possessed, but George was still alive, and somewhere in the depths of the digital world, he was preparing his revenge. David ran, but not from me, from his past, and me. I was now the target, watched live, trapped in the center of a past I never asked to know. As I walked out of the warehouse, my phone vibrated again. They're not just watching anymore. They're getting closer. No signature, no sender. But that message brought something else with it. A new awareness. David wasn't the only one buried. Truth was buried too, and if I wanted to uncover it, I'd have to dig much, much deeper. Before leaving Everett, I watched David's secret video over and over. Every expression, every breath, every pause. To me, they were weapons. In the eyes of a woman trying to recognize the man she married. "Tried to protect you," he said. "But to protect me, he had to bury me first. And now, it was my turn. When I returned home, I looked at the box that held his ashes. I had never opened it, not out of respect, but out of fear. I didn't want to face the truth. But that night I put on gloves. I unsealed the bag inside the box. The ashes weren't just gray. There were black metal fragments mixed in burnt circuit pieces, a heat sink from a processor. This wasn't a body. This was a bonfire for a lie. David hadn't died. He had buried himself as a digital trace, and I had mourned. A ghost for years. Just then, Cypher Chat opened again. A live stream link popped up. The title read, "Halter System Failure, Final Upload." I clicked on the screen. David, live. He was alive. Elizabeth. "I did love you, but I couldn't trust. You might have betrayed me. You could have helped George. So to protect you, I kept you in the dark." He was still trying to justify himself, but I was done listening, and now I was the one who would shut him down. In the 24 hours. After Elizabeth infiltrated David's digital system, she remained silent, but this silence wasn't grief, it was the calm before the storm. The new broadcast she launched on Cypher Chat was immediately tracked by a global hacker community. It contained a single message: "How does a dead man evade taxes?" With that line, every financial transaction linked to David's identity, every fake passport file, and the entire digital blackmail network built on George Halter's name was leaked, with timestamps, geolocation matches, and Elizabeth's live testimony. David's last traceable signal surfaced near the Mexican border hours later, but he never crossed, because the person they were now hunting wasn't just an identity, he was a man. The system had declared dead, and Elizabeth, she was no longer just a widow. She was a digital justice activist, the woman who dragged the darkness into the light. In Delcora Tech's former presentation hall, a panel was held, "Digital Silence and Betrayal, in Search of the Truth." On stage stood Elizabeth behind her, a screen, the same kind that once displayed David's fake identity. She turned to the crowd and said, "He buried me, but he never threw dirt because he didn't want to hear me scream. That's why I'm alive, and that's why I still have a story to tell, because some deaths aren't mourned. Some deaths are exposed. I buried him, but his real grave was dug in the hearts of those who knew who he really was. And now, it's your turn. Do you think David was really trying to protect me, or just himself? Have you ever mistaken being protected for being silenced? Has someone dead ever sent you a message? If you had to dig up your own past, what secret would you unearth? Drop it in the comments, because sometimes one person's silence becomes another person's light.